Hello, welcome everyone. In endocrine system, I have divided the whole endocrine system into part 1 and part 2. And in part 1 of endocrine system, I have discussed about the various hormonal principles and its functions, then hypothalamus, pituitary, and also the thyroid glands. Okay, their hormones, their secretions, their apparent anatomical aspect, their anatomical locations, etc. I hope you will enjoy this session. So let's start with the session now. Today, in this lecture, I am going to discuss about this endocrine system. In the learning objectives, we will discuss about the hormones and its action method, then various locations of endocrine glands in the human body, and various hormones that are secreted by each endocrine glands, and also I will discuss about various functions of each hormones. Okay, so coming to this, what you see here is a general picture of different types of endocrine gland that is present. That is, we will discuss about the pineal gland, hypothalamus, parathyroid gland, thyroid gland, pituitary gland, then pancreas, adrenal gland, kidneys, and also testes and ovaries in female. Okay, so we will discuss about all these glands today. Coming to this, as far as the definition is concerned, the endocrine system is a control system of ductless gland. You have to note down this word, ductless gland. Okay, so what is the difference between glands with duct and glands without duct? Okay, so when there is a gland that is having the tubular structure through which the secretion of the gland is coming out, we call that as exocrine gland. Okay, whereas there are glands which gives the secretions directly into the bloodstream. They don't have any ducts. Okay, we call that as endocrine glands. Okay, but there are glands which is doing both the function. The secretion goes into the bloodstream as well as the secretions comes to through the duct. We call those glands as heterocrine glands. Okay, these secretions by the endocrine system are the chemicals that is called as hormones. Okay, that circulate within the body through the bloodstream, and it goes and acts on respective cells. Okay, so they are nothing but the chemical substance secreted by cells into the extracellular fluid to regulate the functions of other body cells. The endocrine gland secretes their product immediately into the bloodstream or the interstitial fluid without storage of the chemicals. Okay, hormones act as messengers. Okay, so and are carried by the blood streams to different cells of the body, which interpret these messages and act on them. Okay, so this is the basic things that you have to understand. Endocrine glands means they are the glands that gives their secretions into the bloodstream. Through the bloodstream, it goes and reaches different cells for different type of functions. Okay, so the endocrine system is one of the body's main communication system, controlling system and coordinating the body works. So the important functions, if you see, body energy level maintenance. Okay, sometimes the blood sugar goes up, blood sugar comes down, so all this balance are maintained by the endocrine hormones. Then reproduction. For reproduction, the hormone secretion is very important. Then growth and development. For this also the growth hormone is very essential. Then internal balance of body system called homeostasis. Okay, homeostasis, you would have studied in the introductory classes the definition of homeostasis. It is a balance between the various body level functions. Okay, then response to surroundings, stress hormone, we call that as stress hormones. Okay, whenever you are in severe amount of stress, like during the time of fight, you get enormous amount of energy and you start to fight with the opponent. Okay, so these are all the stress hormones that is released during the time of need. So coming to the organs of endocrine system, typical endocrine glands are pituitary, thyroid, adrenal glands, but exocrine glands are salivary glands, sweat glands, liver, all these things are exocrine glands. Okay, then the study of endocrine system, we call it as endocrinology. So there is a specialty of endocrinology in medical education, where they will maintain the normal hormonal level in the body. Okay, then chemistry, coming to the chemistry. So these hormones are of two types. One is the steroidal type, other is the protein type. Protein we call it amino acid. Okay, there are two types of hormones. One is the steroidal types and other is the protein type, that is amino acid type. So we are going to see what are all these hormones, and there are other hormones called prostaglandin, which is coming under escanoids. We will see that separately. So coming to the steroidal hormones, if you see, the estrogen, aldosterone, cortisol, progesterone, testosterone, all these are steroidal hormones. Okay, whereas amino acid types are this protein based hormone like insulin, growth hormone. Then glycoprotein hormones are the follicle stimulating hormone, that is secreted by pituitary, luteinizing hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone. These are secreted in the pituitary, anterior pituitary. Human chorionic gonadotrophin is released by the placenta, that is glycoprotein type of hormone. Then peptide hormones are this antidiuretic hormone, oxytocin, melanocyte stimulating hormone, thyroid releasing hormone, and gonadotrophic releasing hormone. These are all the peptide types. Okay, then this, in the amino acid itself, there is another variety called tyrosine derived hormones, which is called the epinephrines, norepinephrine, dopamine, and thyroxine. Okay, so these are all the two main categories. One is the steroidal hormones, other is the amino acid hormones. In the amino acid, there are peptide group and tyrosine group. Okay, in the peptide group, the protein, glycoprotein, and peptide divisions are there. In the tyrosine group, these are all the direct hormones. Okay, these are all the, mainly you have to remember two types of hormones: steroidal hormones as well as the peptidal hormones. So all the steroidal hormones are lipids that is synthesized in the gonads, that is reproductive glands and also adrenal glands, then synthesized from cholesterol. Then they are permeable to cell membrane, that is they can pass through the cell membrane. Receptors are located generally inside the cell. I will show you in the next slide what are all the receptors. And here you can see various chemical structure of each hormone. For example, cortisol, how the chemical structure is present; aldosterone, how the chemical structure is present; testosterone, how the chemical structure is present; estradiol, how the chemical structure is present; cholesterol, how the chemical structure is present. Okay, so let's go to the next topic. Now coming to non-steroidal hormone, that is the amino acid type of hormones. They are generally impermeable, that is they don't pass through the cell membrane, but they get attached to the receptors that is present in the cell membrane. That is, if you see in the in this picture, see, this is a cell membrane. Okay, it is a biphospholipid layer. This is a lipid molecule and this is a phosphorus molecule. On the cell membrane there are receptors. You see, these are receptors. So the non-steroidal hormones comes and stick to this receptor and then pass through inside the cell. They cannot go directly into the cell like a steroidal hormones. Okay, that is what you have to understand. So this is a growth receptor, this is insulin receptor, these are all the beta adrenergic receptors which attaches the adrenal and noradrenaline, which attaches the and send them inside the cell So coming to this hormonal regulation, so how these hormonal levels are normally regulated in the body, this is what you have to understand. The main hormonal regulation method is by negative feedback mechanism. So in the coming slides I will show you the examples of negative feedback mechanism. And the increase in hormonal activity decrease the production of hormone. So then this is the negative form feedback mechanism. So endocrine gland stimuli, I will give you the examples in the future slide. Okay, the immune system and other factors also contribute as control factors to maintain the constant level of hormones. Okay, then hormone targets cell specificity. So when the hormone is released, then where this hormone has to go and reach, to which cell it has to reach. For example, growth hormone has to reach the skeletal muscle cells and the bone cells. Like insulin has to reach all the cells to produce the ATP. So likewise, there are something called, you have to understand about the hormone target cell specificity. That is, a given hormone influences the activity. The given hormone influences the activity of only certain tissue cells referred as the target cells. Okay. For the thyroxine is the principal hormone, that is nearly all body cells have receptors to it. Okay. So in all the body cell membrane, you have the thyroxine receptors. So once the thyroxine comes to bloodstream, the thyroxine is caught by the receptors and sent inside the cell. Okay. All hormone receptors binding is a crucial step. The extent of target cell activation depends on blood level of the hormone, the relative number of receptors, the affinity of the receptor hormones. Okay. So these are all the factors how effectively the hormone is functioning in the body. Okay. So there are two phenomena. One is up regulator and other is down regulator. Up regulator means there are more number of receptors, and down regulation of the hormone is due to less number of receptors. Okay. These are the receptors that you can see. This is the cell membrane, as I told you before. This is the epidermal growth receptors, then insulin receptors. So insulin comes attached to the receptor. Through the receptor they go inside the cell. Okay, and do the help in the ATP production. Then beta adrenergic receptors. You see, there are more number of adrenergic receptors. So once the stress hormone is released, immediately a more number of cells brings the adrenal hormone inside the cell, and enormous amount of energy is produced within a fraction of second. Okay, they act very fast. Okay, so that is why more number of adrenergic receptors are present. Okay, so as I want to tell you about a few examples about negative feedback mechanism. So now if you see the general mechanism, the endocrine cells release the hormones into the bloodstream. These hormones comes and reaches the target cell, and the cell will respond according to the hormone present, according to the way they receive the hormone. Okay, so coming to this negative feedback, if you see, the pancreas will release insulin in response to the rising blood glucose level. Okay, so when the blood sugar level increases in the blood, then immediately pancreas, the beta cells in the pancreas will release the insulin to the bloodstream. That insulin will go to the muscle cell and liver cell, and the uptake of glucose into the cell is taking place. Okay, so reduced glucose level decreases the release of insulin, whereas increased glucose level will increase the release of insulin. Okay, whereas positive feedback mechanism, I will give you an example. So whenever the posterior pituitary, that is releasing the oxytocin during the time of the labor, delivery, during the time of delivery, the oxytocin is released. That oxytocin reaches the uterine muscle and the uterine contraction will start. Okay, so this stretch receptors, once the baby is born, once the baby is born, the stretch is not present on the uterine muscles, then there is inhibition of release of oxytocin into by the posterior pituitary. So this is directly the stretch receptors making the posterior pituitary to stop the hormone oxytocin release. So that's what we call it as positive feedback mechanism. Okay, so other control of hormone method is due to by endocrine gland stimuli, and also nervous system is also controlling the hormone release. Okay, here you can see there are three types of factors. One is humoral stimulation, neural stimulation, hormonal stimulation. How the humoral stimulation? So for example, whenever the calcium level in the blood is reduced, the calcitonin and the parathyroid secretion is increased or decreased. So that's what we call the humoral stimulation. Okay, whereas whenever there is a stress response, immediately the nervous spinal cord will directly activate the adrenal gland to release this epinephrine and norepinephrine. So that is neural hormone released by the neural stimulation. Then hormonal stimulation, for example, pituitary, anterior pituitary releases the thyroid stimulating hormone. That thyroid stimulating hormone comes to the thyroid gland and orders the thyroid gland to reduce T3 and T4. Okay, so likewise all the glands will listen to the pituitary hormones. Okay, so this is how the glands hormonal release by the endocrine glands is controlled by another gland. So that is why the pituitary gland is called as a master of all endocrine glands. Okay, the pituitary gland, though it is the smallest of all endocrine glands, it controls the secretion of other glands. I will show you. So coming to the mechanism of hormone action, so the hormone action is done by a change in plasma membrane permeability. Okay, the permeability of the cell membrane will change and the action of hormone will take place. The synthesis of proteins taking place for the hormonal action. Then enzyme activation and deactivation also controls the hormonal action. Then induction of secretory activity by various type of stimulation. Then stimulation of mitosis. So this hormone mitosis is multiplication of the cells, isn't it? So the growth hormone will stimulate the mitotic activity. Okay, so then the other two mechanism of hormone action is one by direct gene activation and secondary messenger system. Okay, so in the secondary messenger system there is a cyclic AMP pathway and inositol triphosphate pathway. So both this in this mechanism only the hormonal action is taking place. Okay, so coming to this, in direct gene activation, the single transaction of some hormones with steroid structures involves nuclear hormone receptors when bound to specific sequence of DNA serve as on-off switches for transcription into the cell nucleus. Okay, they go and directly activate the genes that is present in the DNA of the nucleus. Okay, so this is the direct mechanism of hormonal action. Now we are going to see about the hypothalamus. Before going into the hypothalamus, I would like to show you the location of hypothalamus so that it is easy for you to understand. Okay, so when you know hypothalamus is present in the base of the cerebral peduncle, I mean on the cerebral peduncle. Okay, hypothalamus is present on the cerebral peduncle. So for that I have to show you the hypothalamus. I will show you the hypothalamus. I have to go deep into the brain stem. So if you see here, this is a fox. Okay, now it is present in the cerebral peduncle. Okay, here this is the cerebral peduncle, and here, okay, here what you see here, this is a hypothalamus. This tissue is the hypothalamus. Though hypothalamus is a very small narrow part. Okay, I mean very small tissue which is weighing around 4 to 6 gram in the normal adult. Okay, this is the hypothalamus. This is exactly on the cerebral peduncle. This is the leg of the cerebrum, and in this place only you have the hypothalamus. In the posterior part you have the epithalamus, and this hypothalamus continuation is this pituitary stalk and the pituitary gland. Okay, so in nervous system I have discussed a lot about the hypothalamus. Its various functions like controlling the autonomic nervous system, then controlling the endocrine system, controlling the body temperature, controlling the various mechanism, etc., etc. Many functions are there for hypothalamus. So how this hypothalamus is coming under the endocrine system? Okay, so In fact, the hypothalamus is a nervous tissue, and this pituitary gland is the endocrine system, endocrine tissue. Okay, so this gland is called as a neuroendocrine gland. Okay, so what you see, this extension is called as a infundibulum or the pituitary stalk, and this peanut shape is the pituitary gland. Okay, peanut gland shape is the pituitary gland. So this pituitary stalk, this is a bridge between the endocrine system and the nervous system. That is why it's called as the neuroendocrine gland. How? This is what you have to know. So as a layman, there are nerve fibers that is starting in the hypothalamus and then coming and ending in the posterior pituitary. Okay, and there are hormones that is released in the hypothalamus, that is brought by the blood vessels to the anterior pituitary. Okay, so this is called as a portal system. There are minute blood vessels. They start as a venules here and then come and end here as a venule. Okay, this is what we call it as a portal system. Small venule ends as a small venule here. So that's called as a portal system. Through these small blood vessels, the hypothalamus hormones comes to the pituitary gland, anterior pituitary gland, and listening to this hormone, this anterior pituitary gland will release certain hormones. Okay, we will see what are those hormones. First, know this. So this is how the mechanism is present. So let's see what are all these hormones that is released by this place here. Okay, so the hypothalamus is located below the thalamus. Okay, the thalamus is a egg-shaped structure in the cerebral peduncle, forming the major portion of ventral region of the diencephalon. The hypothalamus links the nervous system to the endocrine system through the pituitary gland. Okay, so that's why it's called as a neuroendocrine gland. So the hypothalamus, apart from this controlling of nervous system, it is also controlling the body temperature, hunger, thirst, and the biological clock, which we call it as a circadian rhythm. Okay, so now let us see these are all the hormones produced in the hypothalamus. That is thyrotrophin releasing hormone. This goes to the pituitary, anterior pituitary, and makes anterior pituitary to release thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay, then gonadotrophin releasing hormone, that goes to anterior pituitary and makes the anterior pituitary to release this FSH and LH, that is a gonadotrophic hormone. Okay, then growth hormone releasing hormone goes to the anterior pituitary and makes them to release growth hormone. Then corticotrophin releasing hormone produced in the hypothalamus goes to the anterior pituitary and makes anterior pituitary cells to produce adrenal-corticotrophic hormone, that in fact goes to the adrenal cortex and makes them to secrete glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids. Okay, so then somatostatin hormone is also produced in hypothalamus, and dopamine, this is also produced in the hypothalamus. Okay, so this is okay, so this so at the end of the thing you have to understand is the hypothalamus is the overall boss of the endocrine system. Then the next boss is the pituitary gland. Then below pituitary gland, all this thyroid gland, gonads, reproductive glands, all these are working under the control of pituitary gland. So this is the cycle you have to understand in the endocrine system. Hormone secretion from the anterior pituitary is regulated by the hypothalamus. Okay, neuroendocrine neurons, as I told you, there are some neurons, nerve cells, that is starting in the hypothalamus, coming to the pituitary stalk and ending in the posterior pituitary. So that is why it's called as, through this neuron some hormones are released. I mean the posterior pituitary is controlled by this hypothalamus. Okay, the neuroendocrine neurons in the hypothalamus projects axons to the medial eminence and to the base of brain. At this site, the neurons can release substance into small blood vessels that directly to the anterior pituitary gland. So that is called as a hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal veins. Okay, the small blood vessels that is connected from the hypothalamus till the pituitary gland. That's called as hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal vessels. Okay, so the somatostatin is produced in the periventricular nucleus. Growth hormone is released in the arcuate nucleus of the hypothalamus. Then the gonadotrophin releasing hormone is produced in the preoptic and arcuate nucleus. Okay. Then the corticotrophin releasing hormone is produced in the pravocellular and paraventricular nucleus. Then CRH and the vasopressin is produced in the pravocellular nucleus. So we have to know the different types of nucleus in the hypothalamus. Okay, here this is the right hypothalamus and this is left hypothalamus, and this is the pituitary stalk and this is a pituitary gland. Okay, so what you see here, this is the anterior pituitary and this is the posterior pituitary. In the posterior pituitary, the axon, that is the neurons, are traveling from the hypothalamus to the posterior pituitary, whereas in the anterior pituitary the blood vessels are bringing the released hormones from the anterior from the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary. So these are all the various type of nucleus that is present inside the hypothalamus. Okay, the supraoptic nucleus, lateral hypothalamic nucleus, periventricular nucleus, and all this stuff. Okay, next, pineal gland. The pineal gland is also called as epithalamus. Okay, that is present in the posterior aspect. So this is the egg-shaped thalamus. This is the egg-shaped thalamus, you can see here. So what you can see here is this I will show you the thalamus. Yeah, this is the egg-shaped thalamus. This is the egg-shaped thalamus. Okay, so underneath you have the hypothalamus. You have the hypothalamus. This is the hypothalamic area. This is hypothalamus. Posterior aspect, you have a small projection that is called as a epithalamus. It is also called as a pineal gland. Okay, which is called as a pineal gland. Okay, this pineal gland is present in between the two thalamus in the posterior aspect. Anterior aspect you have the pituitary gland, whereas in the posterior aspect you have the pineal gland. So this pineal gland has some cells called as pinealocytes, okay, that produces the hormone called melatonin. Okay, so this melatonin is responsible for sleep cycle. Okay, so once the melatonin is reduced, the skeletal muscles relaxes and you go in for deep sleep. Okay, so people who don't have secretion of melatonin, they suffer from insomnia, that is loss of sleep. Okay, so we will go to the pineal next gland. So pituitary gland. Okay, the pituitary gland is also called as a master of all endocrine glands. Okay, so let us see the location of pituitary gland. Let us see the location of pituitary gland. If you see in this, if you see the pituitary gland in this, there are something. Okay, this is the sphenoid bone. This is the sphenoid bone, and here you can see there is a pit. This pit is called as a pituitary fossa. This is a lateral view. This is a lateral view. You can see this is a pit. Okay, this is a pit. This is called as a pituitary fossa or sella turcica or hypophyseal fossa or pituitary fossa. Any name you can give. Okay, so here you can see this is the anterior and posterior clinoid process, and here is a place where the diaphragmatic cella, the concentration of dura mater, is attached. There is a hole in the diaphragmatic cella. Through this hole the pituitary stalk comes and sits in this place. So in the lateral view of X-ray, if you see a calcified spot here, then it means there is some pituitary calcification and it disturbs the function of other glands. Okay, so this is what you have to understand. Okay, now if you see, this is the pituitary gland. This is the pituitary gland, and here you can see the pituitary stalk. Okay, pituitary stalk. if you see this membrane is called as a diaphragmatic cella. This membrane is called as a diaphragmatic cella, and there is a hole in the membrane. Okay, through this hole the pituitary stalk comes, and the pituitary gland is housed in the pituitary fossa of the sphenoid bone. Okay, so now I will show you. There are something called pituitary adenoma. There is something called as a pituitary adenoma. Here is what you see here is the X-ray CT image of the brain, where you can see there is a big calcified spot. Okay, this is called as a pituitary calcification with the adenoma. Actually, this is a enlarged pituitary gland. This is an enlarged pituitary gland. So if you see here, this is a MRI image. You can see there is a calcification with enlargement of pituitary gland. So this is called as a pituitary tumor or the pituitary adenoma. So we have to remove this pituitary tumor, otherwise it is going to metastasize. I mean, it is going to spread to the other organs. Okay, so we have to give a transsphenoidal approach. We have to break the sphenoid bone and remove the pituitary adenoma. Okay, so we have to artificially replace all these hormones in order to make the patient to survive. So this is what you have to understand about the pituitary gland. Though it is a very small peanut shaped, it is the master of all endocrine glands, controlling all the other glands. It is controlling all the other glands. Okay, so if you see, the function is complex and important for our overall well-being. The pituitary is divided into some books say 2 parts, some books say it is 3 part. Okay, so that is anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary. The ridge in the center is called as the intermediate pituitary. So in Latin it is called a pars anterior, pars intermedius and pars posterior. Okay, the pars anterior is also called as adenohypophysis, and the pars posterior is also called as neurohypophysis. Okay, so as I told you, the anterior pituitary is called as adenohypophysis, comprises of anterior lobe of the pituitary gland, and is a part of endocrine system. Under the influence of hypothalamus, the anterior pituitary produces and secretes several peptide hormones that regulates many physiological processes, including stress, growth, and reproduction. Okay, now let us see what are the hormones that is secreted in the anterior pituitary cells. So what you see here is the different types of cells that is present in the anterior pituitary. Okay, the corticotropes, gonadotropes, somatotropes, gonadotropes, then lactotropes, thyrotropes. Okay, so these cells, they produce hormone called adrenalocorticotropic hormone. This goes to adrenal gland and make the adrenal gland to secrete glucocorticoids. Okay, then the follicle stimulating hormone released the anterior pituitary goes to the ovary and testes and make them to produce estrogen, progesterone, and the testosterone. Okay, then the gonadotrope somatotrope release the growth hormones that goes to liver and the body adipose tissues and make them to help them in the carbohydrate metabolism. Okay, then the luteinizing hormone produced in the anterior pituitary goes to the testes and ovary and they produce these sex hormones. Okay, for example, if luteinizing hormone is not released in the pituitary gland, then the menstrual cycle will be affected and the patient cannot conceive, female cannot conceive the child. Okay, so whenever the female goes to infertility clinic, then they check the luteinizing hormone level, they check the follicle stimulating hormone level, then also they check the estrogen and progesterone level. Okay, then prolactin hormone that is secreted by anterior pituitary goes to the ovary and the mammary gland and make them to secrete estrogen and the milk. Okay, then thyroid stimulating hormone goes to thyroid gland and make the thyroid gland cells to secrete T3 and T4, that is triiodothyronine and tetraiodothyronine. So if TSH is absent, thyroid gland will sleep, but thyroid gland will be normal, cells will be normal, but because it is not receiving the thyroid stimulating hormone, they don't secrete T3 T4. Then also the patient suffers from hypothyroidism. Okay, so likewise in the posterior pituitary is also called as a neurohypophysis, which gives rise to tubero-infundibular pathway. This is nothing but the axons that is extending from the hypothalamus till the posterior pituitary. Okay, so the hormones are made in nerve cell bodies positioned in the hypothalamus, and then these hormones then transported down to the nerve axon cells. Okay, hypothalamic neurons fire such hormones, releasing them into capillaries of the blood pituitary gland. So those hormones are the oxytocin and the vasopressin, that is the antidiuretic hormone. Okay, oxytocin, that is produced in the paraventricular nucleus of the hypothalamus, is released during the time of labor. Okay, at the 9th month exactly, the posterior pituitary will release the oxytocin that starts the uterine contraction, and the mother gets the labor pain. Okay, if the oxytocin is not released at the exact date, then we go for manual induction of pregnancy by injecting the artificial oxytocin. Okay, then the antidiuretic hormone is also called as vasopressin, comes from the supraoptic nucleus of the hypothalamus and goes and acts on the kidney for the urine control. Okay, so this is how the these blood vessels are called as the hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system. That is, in the hypothalamus they start as a small blood vessel, then they become the large vein, and in the pituitary gland they end as a small blood vessels. Okay, so this is called as a portal system. Whereas in the posterior pituitary, the neuron starts in the hypothalamus, and the axon travels all the way to the pituitary stalk to the posterior pituitary gland. Okay, and there is one more thing. This ridge is called as the intermediate pituitary. Okay, this intermediate pituitary, it secretes a hormone called melanocyte stimulating hormone. Okay, so this melanocyte stimulating hormone comes to the skin cells and activate the melanocyte cells to secrete black color pigment called melanin. So congenitally, when some genetic disease affects this MSH, what happens, these kind of people, they don't produce any melanin pigment in the body, and they are very sensitive to sunlight. We call those people as albinos. Okay, that condition is called as albinism. Okay, so this is how the growth hormone is coming from the pituitary to the liver and the body bone and the fat cells to help in the process of growth. Okay, in case the growth hormone is too much, if there is more release of growth hormone, then there is increased enormous amount of growth. Okay, you can see the picture, the person is gigantic in appearance. Okay, so whereas if the growth hormone is less, if the growth hormone is not released, then the patient doesn't grow. We call them as dwarf. Okay, we call it as dwarfism. Okay, they don't grow at all. Okay, so the bone calcium bone strength will be there, but the growth will not be present, and this is the normal growth level. This is the normal growth level. Okay, this is the gigantism, this is the dwarfism due to disturbance in the growth hormone. So this growth hormone is secreted by the negative feedback mechanism, where there is control of this growth hormone by the negative feedback mechanism. Okay, then homeostatic imbalance, as I told you, if there is imbalance in the homeostasis, then the hypersecretion, the increased secretion of growth hormone leads to gigantism. You can see there is this increased growth. Okay, and you can see the acromegaly. So when the child, during the time of childhood age, if there is increased secretion, the person goes very tall. Whereas after 21 years, because person human being go up to 22 years, isn't it? So after adulthood, when there is increased growth hormone secretion, then there you can see the mooned face, like the increased jaw size, big face. Okay, fingers are all very big in nature. Okay, this is called as acromegaly. Okay, whereas if there is less secretion of growth hormone, then you can see the limbs length are very short, the mental maturity is present, whereas there is shortening of the limb. We call that as pituitary dwarfism. Okay, that is the growth hormone. So there are some tumors in pituitary gland. Okay, I mean, if there is increased amount of growth hormone, that can lead to this gigantism, acromegaly, enlargement of facial features, heart disease can come, hypertension can be present, joint inflammation comes, carpal tunnel, that is syndrome, that is pain in the wrist and the thumb index in the middle finger. Okay, then amenorrhea, that is absence of menstrual cycle, impotence, the patient if there is a menstrual cycle disturbance, then the female cannot conceive, that leads to impotence in male also. Then lactation is disturbed. Okay, like then cardiovascular disease like heart disease, diabetes, hypertension also comes. Okay, then as I told you, coming to the posterior pituitary, okay, as I told you, only the neuron connection is present between the hypothalamus and the posterior pituitary. Okay, which releases oxytocin and vasopressin. Okay, whereas in the anterior pituitary you have the blood vessel connection, which secretes this FSH, LH, growth hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, prolactin and ACTH. Okay, let's go to the next gland, that is a thyroid gland. Okay, so this thyroid gland is present in the anterior aspect of the thyroid cartilage in the neck. Okay, generally the thyroid gland enlargement is not visible. Okay, so only in the enlarged thyroid gland is visible in the neck. Okay, so first we will see the anatomy of the thyroid gland. Okay, the location and the thing. Okay, if you see here, the thyroid gland is present in the neck region. Okay, the thyroid gland is present in the neck region, and if you look at this respiratory cartilages, okay, if you look at the respiratory cartilages, this is the thyroid cartilage, this is the thyroid cartilage, and here you have the cricoid cartilage, and these are all the C-shaped cartilaginous rings. Okay, this is a tracheal passage. Okay, so this thyroid gland, it has the right lobe, left lobe connected by the isthmus. This connection is called as the isthmus. Okay, this connection is called as the isthmus. And you know, in the neck there are different type of fascias. In the neck there are different types of fascias. In fact, the thyroid gland is enclosed by this prevertebral pretracheal fascia. The thyroid gland is enclosed by the pretracheal fascia. So if you look at the thyroid gland, you see in the neck, if you cut the cross section of the neck, this is the investing layer of the deep fascia of the neck below the platysma muscle. Okay, then you have the vertebrae and the trachea. Okay, this is the vertebral, this is the vertebra, and here you have the trachea, you have the trachea. Okay, so the other fascias that is present here is the carotid sheath. Okay, you have two carotid sheath. Okay, then you have the prevertebral fascia, you have the prevertebral fascia and the pretracheal fascia. This is the pretracheal fascia. Okay, this is the connective tissues that is present in the neck. In fact, these connective tissues start in the base of the skull and go all the way to the mediastinum. So what happens, this pretracheal fascia will engulf, it encloses the whole thyroid gland and pass down. Okay, this encloses the whole thyroid gland and then pass down. So what is the importance of the pretracheal fascia is, once since the pretracheal fascia is enclosing this whole thyroid gland, what happens at the initial stage of enlargement of thyroid gland, the enlargement is not visible in the neck. Okay, so only in the chronic enlargement of thyroid gland, then the gland will protrude out. Okay, so that is the clinical features you have to understand. This is the whole pretracheal fascia is encapsulating the whole thyroid gland, and it is going to the mediastinum. It is going to the mediastinum. If you look at the thyroid gland level, it is present between the C5, C6 and C7 vertebral level. It is present between the C5, C6 and C7 vertebral level. So if you look at the blood supply to the thyroid gland, it has two blood supply. One is a superior thyroid artery. This is a direct branch. This is the direct branch from the external carotid artery, and it is supplying the superior aspect of thyroid gland. Then the next blood vessel is the inferior thyroid artery. Inferior thyroid artery. This is the direct branch from the subclavian artery. So if you look at this, this is subclavian artery. Okay, in this you have the inferior thyroid artery, that is called as thyrocervical trunk, that gives a branch to the inferior thyroid artery, and this is how the inferior aspect of thyroid gland is getting the blood supply. Okay, so what happens whenever removed when one lobe of thyroid gland is removed, we call it as hemithyroidectomy. Okay, when both the lobes of the thyroid gland is removed, we call it as total thyroidectomy. Okay, so in the total thyroidectomy, what you have to do, the surgeon has to clamp the superior thyroid artery as well as the inferior thyroid artery. Okay, both the superior and the inferior thyroid artery has to be ligated, and then only the thyroid gland can be removed in total, otherwise there will be more blood loss. Okay, this is present in the right side as well as in the left side. So this is the blood vessel. Now let's let us discuss about the other aspects of thyroid gland, even the histological aspect also. Okay, so the thyroid gland is located in the anterior aspect of the neck between C5 to C7 vertebra. It has two lobes, right lobe and left lobe, connected by the isthmus. Thyroid gland generally enlarges during the time of puberty, pregnancy and lactation. Okay, puberty is the time of the first menstrual cycle. Then pregnancy is, the pregnant time. Then luteal phase of the menstrual cycle is the second phase. Menstrual phase cycle, you will understand that. Then it is highly vascularized gland. Okay, so what you see here is the histological structure. You can see these are all the thyroid follicular cells. Okay, and these are all the colloid vesicles. Colloidal vesicles. Okay, so what happens, these are the parafollicular cells. The parafollicular cells secretes the T3 and T4, that is triiodothyronine and tetraiodothyronine. They come and store in the eosinophilic colloids here. Okay, in these colloids the concentration of the thyroxine is increased, and whenever there is a demand, this thyroxine goes to the bloodstream. Okay, so synthesis and circulation of thyroid hormones. The follicle cells, they secrete the thyroglobulin containing iodine stored in the lumen stains. Then TSH stimulates the T3 and T4 secretions in the thyroid gland. Okay, so if you see this thyroid target cell, in fact all the cells have the needs thyroxine, because thyroxine is acting as a catalyst in the energy production, in the metabolic activity. Okay, so in fact all the cells need thyroxine gland. Okay, so if you see here, this thyroid hormones, they increases the glucose level by and amino acid synthesis increase sympathetic activity, promotes normal muscle function and development, increases oxygen utilization and heat production, promotes normal functioning of the heart, promotes normal development of nervous system for normal maturation and growth of the skeletal system. So in fact, for all the organs the body to work normally, you need thyroxine. This is very simple. Okay, so the thyroxine is the main hormone for metabolic activity. By metabolism only we get energy, isn't it? So if there is less secretion of thyroid gland, we call that as hypothyroidism. Okay, there are different, the reason is to get hypothyroidism are many reasons. One is this Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is called as autoimmune. There are some autoimmune disease which causes inflammation to the thyroid cells, and that is called as Hashimoto's thyroiditis, inflammation of thyroid gland. Some drugs can disturb the function of the secretion of thyroid gland. Then the enzyme deficiencies, then congenitally the patient can suffer from hypothyroidism. So the congenital hypothyroidism is known as the cretinism. Also called, in the adult it is called as myxedema. You can see in the childhood the hypothyroidism we call it as a cretinism, where there is puffy face and thickness of the tongue also. Okay, so this is the features of the hypothyroidism. You can see the puffy face, and the patient's activities also becomes very less. Okay, you can see in hypothyroidism there will be puffiness of the face. Okay, there will be weakness because muscle cramps will be present, then intolerance to cold. Okay, then thick skin and dry skin will be present, decreased sweating, pulses will be slow, constipations, then the appetite will be less, mental sluggishness, depressions, high blood. All these are the features of hypothyroidism, whereas in hyperthyroidism it will be opposite. Okay, so as I told you, okay, so this Hashimoto's thyroiditis is nothing but autoimmune disease where there is infiltration by the lymphocyte cells. Okay, and that leads to the disturbance of the hypothyroidism. Then in hyperthyroidism, that is increased thyroid gland stimulation, all the symptoms will be opposite in nature. Okay, so when there is protruding eyes, the eyes looks like a dead body, isn't it? That's why we call it as the Graves disease. Okay, so there will be increased growth, then increased activity, then sleep disturbance will be present, intolerance to heat will be present, the pulse will be fast, often there will be bowel movement, increased appetite, weight loss, and emotional, there will be, patient will be emotionally disturbed. Okay, so these are all the features of hyperthyroidism. So hyperthyroidism patients will be having all the opposite functions of hypothyroidism. Okay, so there are many, in case the thyroid gland enlargement is present due to some cell hyperplasia and all this stuff, we can go for thyroidectomy, removal of the thyroid gland. So like drugs like carbamazole also can be used for this hyperthyroidism. Okay, so this is what you have to. Then there is next hormone produced by the thyroid gland, that is a calcitonin. So I will tell about this calcitonin with the parathyroid gland. So first you have to know about the parathyroid gland, then you will know the difference between the calcitonin hormone and the parathormone. I will tell this sequentially. So if you see the parathyroid gland, if you look at the parathyroid gland, this parathyroid gland is present in the posterior aspect of the thyroid gland. Okay, if you look at this, I am going to turn the thyroid gland, and you see here there are some 4 dots. This one, okay, these 4 dots is called as the parathyroid gland. These 4 dots are called as the parathyroid gland. So this parathyroid gland secrete a hormone called parathormone. Okay, that is very essential for balance of this calcium. I will show you the mechanism. So now if you see, this is just know this is the location of the parathyroid gland. This is the location of the parathyroid gland. As I told you, it's it is present in the posterior aspect of the thyroid gland. Okay, so in response to too little calcium in the diet, the parathyroid gland makes parathormone. Okay, this parathormone goes to the bone and plugs the calcium away and then keep the calcium in the blood. In fact, the calcium is very essential for muscle contraction, for nerves function and everything. Okay, so always there is a normal calcium level has to be maintained. So when the calcium level is decreased in the blood, the parathormone is released and they go to the bone and they removes the calcium and bring it to the blood. So when there is more amount of calcium in the blood, then the calcitonin that is present in the released by thyroid gland will store this calcium in the bones. Okay, I will show you this. If you see this picture, you will be able to understand. Okay, so as I told you, the chief cells, this is the histological appearance of the parathyroid gland. Okay, so if you see here, here you see, just observe carefully, when there is high calcium level in the blood, the calcitonin is released by the thyroid gland that goes and stores the calcium in the bone, and thereby it reduces the blood calcium level. Okay, hypercalcemia is also dangerous, hypocalcemia is also dangerous, which is increase and decrease level of calcium level in the blood. Okay, so when the blood calcium level comes down, what happens? The parathyroid gland releases the parathormone that takes the calcium from the bone and increases the calcium level. So this is the homeostatic balance, okay, between the thyroid and the parathyroid gland. This is what you have to understand. Okay, this is what you have to understand. This is a negative feedback mechanism where the release of this calcitonin and the parathormone is controlled. So suppose, for example, in case if there is more parathyroid gland function, for example, you see, in case if there is less amount of parathormone, I mean calcium in the blood, what happens? This parathormone will take the calcium from the bones, or it will stop the kidney to release the calcium, and also it absorbs the calcium from the food, thereby the calcium level is increased. Okay, so that is the action of this parathormone, whereas calcium, if you look at the malfunction of this parathormone, okay, then we call it as hypoparathyroidism and hyperparathyroidism. So in case there is less secretion of parathormone, then what happens? There is muscle spasm, convulsions, paralysis, difficulty in breathing, GI hemorrhage, and eventually death can happen. Whereas if there is elevations of parathormone, then what happens? There is increased resorption of this calcium from the skeletal system, and thereby it can lead to renal stone formation, bone pains, and pathological fractures also. Okay, so this is the important thing you have to understand, the hyperparathyroidism. So increased parathormone is also bad, and decreased parathormone is also bad. So increased parathormone leads to renal stone formation, decreased parathormone will lead to this kind of muscle spasm and difficulty in breathing. Okay, so By this we will complete this parathyroid gland, and we will continue with the other glands in the coming sessions. Okay.